Hey fellow cakers, thanks for joining us with a very special tutorial this time. I'm making our very own anniversary cake. It's only taken 14 years. We haven't had a wedding cake and we haven't had an anniversary cake. If you're in the business of making cakes, you'll know that your cakes tend to fall by the wayside while you're busy making everyone else's. So this year we decided to treat ourselves and make our own. So we've got 3 tiers of beautiful buttercream done in all different techniques for you. We've placed it on a gorgeous Robert Gordon cake stand and we've topped it off with a custom topper from A La Roche Party Printables. There will be a link down below for ordering that, especially if you're in Australia. We highly recommend and it looks stunning. So let's get started with all of these techniques. Now the first tier that I'm going to work with for you is our bottom tier, and you'll notice that it's not a real cake. The reason for this is pretty simple. It's just that this is our anniversary cake and we don't need to feed about 100 people. So I've gone ahead and used a styrofoam cake. Now what you want to do is go ahead and kind of treat it like a real cake. Do a crumb coat on it. We want to do crumb coats on all of our 3 tiers. Make sure that your crumb coat is in the colour that it's going to be with, because the whole point of a crumb coat is to hide the crumbs, or in this case to lock in any styrofoam, but it's also to have a little bit of coverage on there so that when you're doing your detail, if you happen to see any of the cake, it's the same colour as the detail that you're doing. So in this case, all of our little rows of layers. So I've gone ahead and done that. The next step is that I want the top of this cake to still look like a real cake, and so I need to add a nice thick coating of buttercream, more like a finished smooth top. So in order to work with it a bit easier, what I find is I use some double-sided tape. When I'm doing the crumb coat, I actually put a little bit of double-sided down onto the turntable. Keep the cake that way and then you can pry it up with some spatulas. So what I'm going to do now is use that same technique and put some double-sided tape onto our cake plate. Now I've gone ahead and made it gold because you may see a little bit of the side of it, and I'm placing this, as you know, on a gold cake stand. So you can make the board a little bit larger than the cake if you like. I've gone for exactly the same size so that it'll be really snug, because I want it to look like it really doesn't have much of a board at all. So you put your double-sided down on the board, then just pry it up and we'll attach the cake. So just picking it up, you'll notice the dark colours, it's a little bit messier. Just feeling around with my pinky fingers to make sure, and then checking the front, and then we can press down a little, trying not to get too much colour on here. Now we can pick it up, and because it now weighs a little bit more, it will tend to stay put a little more like a real cake would now that we're going to do this top layer. Now for the colours, I've written down everything in the PDF for you of which colours that I used. In this we've got 2 types of navy, the Sugar Flare and the Americolour. But a quick tip that I will say about doing dark colours, whether it's navy, black, red, just keep tinting it until you get about 3/4 of the way to the depth that you want, and then stop. Let it rest for about half an hour and you will find that the colour intensifies. So you'll even see that when I'm working with this, it looks like a really dark, strong navy colour in our bowl. But as I go to smear it on, it will look a little bit lighter than this, and as it dries, you will get some more intensity in the colour. So instead of continuing to add colour and colour until you can taste it, just back off a little bit and leave the icing to have some time, and it will do that for you. So we're going to take some of our buttercream, using our sweet buttercream. I'll put a link below for the video recipe of that, and I'm just going to act like I'm doing a layer. So working in one spot and going around. This is a crusting buttercream, so I can touch the sides, and aside from getting a little bit of colour on my hands, it's not going to come off on me. Okay, So now we'll shimmy it over to the middle a little bit more. I'm going to use a wider scraper. This was just bought at the paint store. You'll see it in lots of our lessons. I just like the fact that it covers the entire surface. So I'm going to brace the cake a little bit. Start just in front of the edge so that I'm not taking the edge off. Turn and do it again. And you'll just need to clean that off so that you're not creating too many fuzzies or too many bits hanging down the side. Turn the cake a little, again, not all the way to the edge, and just pulling it back. Okay, so we'll get that cleaned off, and then all I'm going to do is, normally we'd go around the sides and lift it all up, but we don't need to worry about that. We just want to make sure that it's smoothed down. We're doing all of our layers, so we're not going to see anything. So this time we can actually pull it down and out of the way. And you can just scrape it off. And I just scrape it onto the side just so you can make sure that there's no styrofoam in there, even though no one's going to obviously eat the icing that's on the styrofoam. You don't want it to get in there so that when you're piping. And there we go. So we're going to allow this to rest. We're going to work on our other tiers first. We're going to get started on our gold one, and we'll get all of that decorated, and then we'll keep this aside for when we stack. So with our middle tier, we've done everything that I said before. We've cut our layers, filled it, and then we've done a crumb coat. If you need a hand with any of those steps, we do have other videos, so I will add the links below along with pretty much every link I can think of for this, and that will help you to get to this stage if you need a hand. So now this has been chilling in the fridge for about half an hour, and I've gone around, chopped the top section off. We're ready to add our messy gold. Okay, so I've got my scrapers, got my spatulas, and got our icing. I'm going to start by just applying a reasonably thick coat onto the sides and to the top. So just coming along, doesn't really matter how messy it is. And our cake is nice and chilled, so I can go ahead and touch it, and I'm not going to get too messy. All right, so we're almost there. Just make sure we've got going all the way over our board. That final little bit. Okay, so now we're going to take our scraper, butt it up against here, slight angle, backwards, just pull it back. We don't have to get all of it off in one go, and just make sure that you're cleaning all the time. Okay, so now we're going to work on the top. We're just going to start by pulling it all in to the center. And then we want to make our top again quite flat because we are stacking another cake on top. So we're going to treat it like a filling layer. Just work our way around and smooth out the top. Take our scraper, pull it over. So now I'm going to switch to a smaller spatula. What I want to do is I'm going to raise all of this up a little bit just to get rid of it. And then we're going to mess up our sides just a touch. So I just want to come back and add a little bit more. And I'm just starting at the bottom and flicking up. I'm just doing it in a slight circular motion, coming back towards myself. Make sure you get a little bit of extra icing, not too much. And it's just a nice flick circular movement. Don't worry, if there's any sections that you don't like, you can always come straight back over the top. And make sure that you're covering the base board. So if you can see any of your cake board as you go around the cake, just make sure that you're getting enough icing to cover that. Okay, if it lifts up, Just get rid of that and just add that section again. And it's really all about speed. Okay, so as you come around, you'll meet up with where you started. Just make sure you don't have too much and try to keep it so that it doesn't look all frayed when it's on your spatula, because that will affect how it looks on the cake. So just nice, quick circular motion. Coming back around. Now we want to pull this into the center. Try and keep your spatula as clean as you can and just drag it towards the middle of the cake. Now, once you're happy with the sides, you just want to come around, lightly patch any bits on the edge. Now, if you've been tinkering with your cake at all a little bit and you've lost some of your top, just go ahead and you can add a little bit more, but remember to start more in the center and fan it out. So if you've got any sections that you think either aren't level or you can see a little bit of cake, start in by about 1 inch or 1/2 inch and slowly make your way out, because otherwise what will happen if you have a whole pile on your spatula and you put it towards the edge, it's going to push out. And now that our sides are done, we don't have the luxury of being able to come back around and pull it up. So you just want to stay inside a little bit, work your way in. The main goal is to make sure that we're completely covered for our cake, but also that the center is nice and level. If you do want to go ahead and bring any texture up, keep in mind that our top tier, we want to keep that really nice and clean around that so we can put in our beautiful pearls. Now we're going to pop this into the fridge and let it set for around 20 minutes or so. You can leave it a little bit longer if you like. I'm going to go ahead and pop the entire turntable in so that when I come out I can clean it up. I don't want it to mess it up right now, because obviously if I move it with spatulas it's going to affect the base of our design. So pop the whole thing in and then we'll be ready for our stacking. Now that our cake's been chilling for a good probably 15-20 minutes is enough, I'm going to go ahead and dowel this tier so that we can get ready to start stacking. There. Okay, now to prep this one, we're just going to add a little bit of buttercream. Remembering that we don't want to affect the overall finish of it. So we don't want to go too far out. We're going to stay nice and close. And we're just going to add enough. We don't want to create a mound or anything like that, change it. We just want it to get sticky again, basically, so that we can pop our cake on. So I'm going to take a large spatula, pop it underneath this cake and just lift that up. Coming around, just making sure that there isn't any fuzzy bits that are going to drop off. Now, in order to put it onto our cake here, I'm going to grab a couple of spatulas because it's short and it doesn't weigh a lot, and because we're working with such a dark colour here, I'm going to go ahead and lift it up on the sides. Okay. Pop another one underneath. And just lifting down. Carefully remove both of them. Okay, and now we're going to let that sit. You can press it down a little bit on here. We're not going to attach our top tier yet. We want to get started on the very, very top part of that. So we're going to get started with that and then we'll get ready to stack it all up. With this tier, we're going to be creating a beautiful pearl effect. Now, most of the time when you see this pearl look, it is done out of fondant and it's done using a pearl strand mold, and it's just wrapped all the way around the cake over and over. which I thought was a beautiful design, but because I love working with buttercream and I wanted our entire cake to be made with buttercream, I thought it is basically just piping shell border. So we're just going to do that over and over and over again. Now, the recipe for the buttercreams is the sweet buttercream, as I mentioned, but to get this a little bit lighter, especially with our butter in Australia being a bit yellow, I have gone ahead and done half butter and half shortening, and that has allowed me to get a little bit more of an off-white shade. So that's the only difference. Now, on top, we want to make sure that all of our rows are perfect. So I'm doing a bit of a cheat, and I've got some cookie cutters, and I'm just going to make some slight indentations on the top, and that will help me to stay focused. As you go around the sides, most of the time it's a little bit easier to stay on track, but when you're working on top, it can be hard when you're starting from scratch to create your own circles. So I'm just going to place this over, making sure that I'm lining it up, because this is going to form what will be perfectly straight. Now, if you're really worried, you can take a tape measure and just measure each section. Give a slight press and lift up, and you'll see that we've got an indentation. Now, I don't need all of them to be done because obviously each pearl is a decent size, but this will just help us to stay on track during this. Just a light press. I might do one more in the middle. Shimmy it over. And that will just help to act as a bit of a guide for us. Take our piping bag. Now I'm using a number 10, which is a large round tip, to do our piping border. Place a bit of icing in. The key to piping easily and well is just not to fill your piping bag up too much. So about halfway is all that you really need. Give it a squeeze. Okay, and just make sure it's flowing really well. Now, when you pipe pearls, they always end up being larger than the tip that you're using. So if you want to do a different size to me, just bear in mind that you don't want to look at your tip size and think of that as your final product. It's going to be a little bit larger than that again. So we're going to go on top. Now, I like to be straight up and down, but then lean it over to the side a little bit, and that will give us a trail off. If you're left-handed, you'll generally start at the right and trail off towards your left. If you're right-handed, it will be the opposite. So in the center, we just want to pipe a nice little dollop, a little bit of pressure. Let your pressure go and pull it back. Doesn't matter which direction you pull your first one because it's in the dead center, but from there we're going to spiral all the way around it. So starting here, squeeze, and then drag it down, rotate, squeeze, and drag it down. Now what you're looking for with this is that you want to keep them quite bubbly, short, so you don't want to drag too much where you can see the drag mark. So what we're aiming for is almost like dots, and they're not quite as connected as normal. Any fuzzy bits, get rid of them straight away because it will affect your finished product. Squeeze and release. So you can see that one, it's poking up. We're just going to go straight over the top of it so that you can't see the tail. It's really important with this look for it to look like dollops. Squeeze and release. So I'm on to the second row now. We just continue. And you can see where this design, it is really, really important that you've done a decent crumb coat on here so that in any of these little crevices, if there's any spaces, you won't see cake. So now we're getting right near the end, just the last few to go. Okay, so now we've got the top done. There's a little bit of a space, that's okay. We'll fix that up as we go up the cake. We're going to move along and get it stacked up. So we'll bring this cake over. It's a little bit heavier now, even though it's fake. We've still got the real one on top. We're going to do the same as we did with our bottom tier. I'm going to add a little bit of buttercream just directly onto the dowels. And then just into the center, keeping it nice and small again. And fairly flush. We don't want to get any unevenness. So now we'll pick up the cake. Being gentle. Okay, just give it a little press. You can't press on top like you normally do, so just use the sides. I've popped the cake up onto its final cake stand just to do this piping. It just makes it a really nice height for me. If you're setting it up at a venue and you need to do that later, then you can take a seat. But to make it nice and easy, we've got it on here, and I'm going to do the same pearl technique on our top tier, get that all finished, starting at the bottom and just going around in circles, working up the layers. So squeeze and release. And you just see that there's not much drag happening with these. And whatever is there, I'm going ahead and covering it up. And as we come to the end of our first row, we'll just pop one more into there. We're going to continue our way all the way up the cake, interlocking them. So from now on, you're going to start in between your last and work your way up. The key to this is to make sure that you're spacing them nicely and also that you're giving them enough room up. So don't squash your bottom tier. Make sure that you leave enough room. Continuing our way around the cake. There's a lot of these to do. Just put our last couple on here, and you can see that we've got the top done and the sides done, and then we've got a little section that we need to meet. So we're just going to come along in the spaces and just pipe our last row. And that will just help to seal in that corner or edge of our cake. For our final layer, we're going to be creating a really jagged sort of layered look in our navy buttercream. I'm using a 406 tip, which is basically, it's a really oversized petal tip. It's not quite like a rose, it's a little bit skinnier at the bottom. So there's not a lot of difference between the top and the bottom. And what we're going to be doing is working in a sideways motion. Again, if you're left-handed, starting from the right, going left. If you're right-handed, from the left to the right. Wrap our piping tip in our hand so it's nice and comfortable. Our first layer is going to come up on the cake a little bit, so we want it to actually be raised up. So we're going to come about halfway so that our tip is partly on the cake and partly off. And we're going to just pipe sideways, making sure we attach to the cake and then lifting off. And it's that lifting off and pulling a little bit rather than tapering down like you would with a petal that's going to create the jagged effect. Now some are going to be about this long, some are going to be even longer, and the whole effect of it is to have that variety. So coming back over the last one that you did and working your way across and then lifting off. You can see here that I've done it where this is just a millimetre or so lower than the last, just so that we even get some height differences as well. So now I'm going to come back to another one. This time we might go a touch higher. And just breaking it off. So we're going to work our way all the way around and continue down. Okay, now as we go to do our next layer, we're just going to bring it down about 50% again so that you can still see half of the previous one, and that's where you'll start to see some of these jagged bits still poking through. So now we're down to our final row. We're just going all the way down to where our gold cake plate is, or a cake board, not all the way down to the stand. Now our cake is almost complete. We're going to finish it off with a beautiful custom topper. So I'm just going to place that into the center. And let's see, make sure, especially with these longer ones, that it's going to go the whole way. And just want it to rest just above our pearls. I don't want it to bang into them. Okay, so there you have it. We've finished our anniversary cake. I hope that you've learnt some different techniques, especially things that you might have seen done in fondant, now done in buttercream, which I think is my favourite way to do a cake. And we're off to help celebrate our anniversary with this gorgeous creation.